Like I have to do this job so that I can make money, so I can put food on my table, so I can eat and I can live. But is this job worth it? So the tough part about giving advice for a living is that pretty much nobody can actually tell if you're doing a good job. It's true. Like nobody other than the people who actually do exactly what you do have any basis of telling if you do a good job or not. Which is really bizarre if you think about it, because like it's not really fair to the people who actually need the advice or the service or whatever it is that you do, you know? So most people, they will hire other people to provide a service, in this example, advice. And most of the time, they're going to make a decision to hire that person based off of things that are like not primary at all to the issue that they're trying to solve. I don't know. The easiest example that the average person could relate to is a car mechanic. Like I have no idea how to deal with a car. And quite honestly, I don't really want to. You know, I have these like ideas that it'd be really cool and like macho to be able to figure out how to fix up a car. And one time I used to own this car that was 50 years old, and it literally sat in my driveway in my garage, and I never drove it, and it was in the shop like most of the time because I never felt like putting in the time and energy and effort to figure out how to deal with it, quite honestly. And I took it to a guy and he would fix it, and then it would break, and he would fix it and it would break. And quite honestly, I have no idea if they were good. I have no idea if I got way overcharged. I have no idea if they really fixed the issue or they just set it up so that it would have to be sent back to the shop 2 months later. No idea. But that's how most people make most decisions on things that they're not experts at. It's true. I mean, there's only so many things that we have the capacity to become expert level at. There's only so many things we have the capacity to become even competent at. And then literally everything else, we have no idea what we're talking about. It's true. And what's wild is that in this 21st century universe, these 21st century brains that we have, there is so much stuff that everybody all the time is trying to jam pack into our minds. There's so much stuff that we could spend our attention on, and like way more than we ever have in human history. And the reality is we're just not built for all of this. We have these limited attention spans. And the only effective way to live your life is to basically ignore almost everything. If you think about it, that's true. I mean, how many commercials do we see for God knows what on TV? Freaking everything on the internet, before you can even look at like what you're trying to get to, there's an ad for something, for who knows what. And they're just the most ridiculous, like obscure niche random products. I got a freaking ad today for a one of those mobile tire pumps. You know, it's like the size of your iPhone, and you just hook it up to your tire when your wheel goes flat, and you just hit the button and it blows up. Like, what use do I have for that? I guess if my tire goes flat, but I have no idea why I even saw that. And I'm going to forget about it by tomorrow, because that's how my brain works. And it's not just my brain, it's literally everybody's brain. We can't pretend like we have the capacity for all of this stuff. And so the thing that I've been thinking about recently is, as we add all of this stuff into our lives, how much of the incremental stuff above and beyond what we actually need, this incremental stuff that we stuff into our brains, is actually additive to the quality of our life, right? How much of the stuff that we actually spend energy on actually like produces satisfaction? I don't know. What's funny, I guess, is we don't really internalize this, but we outsource most of the stuff in our life, like in general. Yeah, you know, the car example is, I guess, pretty easy, but I also didn't make the car. I didn't make my iPhone. I didn't put these clothes together. I didn't build this house. I didn't filter the water that I'm drinking. You know, almost everything that I deal with, I've completely outsourced. And I think that the reason that people feel so overwhelmed, I was talking about last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever, how when you ask people questions, like the default response from everybody is just, I don't know. Hey, where do you want to go eat? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know this. I don't know that. Nobody knows anything because there's all this crap flying around in our brains. And we have the entire internet in our pocket at all times. And the more stuff that you have in your brain, the more stuff there is to get out of the way when you're trying to figure out an answer to a question. It's like freaking Where's Waldo in my brain all the time. So we don't think about, like, to what degree is thinking about money or politics or your HOA board or whatever the heck goes on in everybody's brain. To what degree is all of this stuff actually beneficial to our life, and to what degree do we need to outsource everything? I would say there's basically two things in general that you functionally can't outsource. I have not figured out a way to do it. If I could, maybe I would. But there are basically two things, and it's health and relationships. That's it, right? Now, there's a million subcategories to both of those things, and go on the internet and you can break that down. And I really think that those two things probably encompass, let's say, 95% of the things that could possibly happen to you, right? Health and relationships. Sure, health is like sleep and diet and exercise, and then there's a bunch of different things about that. But if you're not healthy, you just die, right? Relationships, whether you want to have relationships or not, here's the thing: you actually need other people. You cannot function without other people. There are people everywhere. Even if you don't want to talk to them, you have to go around them, deal with them. They get in your way. So to some level, you cannot argue with the fact that relationships matter. As much as I wish I could just hide in a closet all day and not talk to anybody, it's impossible. Yet here I am talking to all of you who are watching this, maybe. Everything else beyond health and relationships in your life that you choose to take on is simply adding complexity to your life, okay? It's true. Now, there is a necessary level of complexity that is required sometimes in order to live your life the way that you want, in order to support those first two things, health and relationships. But when we think about all of the stuff that we add into our lives over and above that, I think that we don't often compute, okay, I'm taking on this complexity, I'm taking on this baggage, whatever you want to call it, this friction in my life. Am I getting something commensurate in return? Like, I have to do this job so that I can make money, so I can put food on my table, so I can eat and I can live. But is this job worth it? I think a lot of people probably think about that. I think they get that. Like, I think we basically get, okay, I'm spending 40 hours a week or 30 or 60 or whatever you do doing this thing. And for many people, I may or may not necessarily choose to do this thing, but I'm doing it anyway so that I can get the benefits. So for most people, we have to work. Great. But everything else that you choose to take on as a personal responsibility adds complexity to your life. And there's a different level of complexity for different things, right? So having a job is a different level of complexity than owning a job. Those are different things. Having a job is going to work and somebody else tells you what to do. Plug into this system. Do this thing. Sometimes you get a certain level of decision-making capacity. Sometimes you get a certain level of management capacity or organizational responsibility. So more of those things adds complexity. Usually we do those things because there's a commensurate monetary payoff, okay? But again, having more money doesn't necessarily make your life better. That's actually very well documented. But when we take on more complexity at our job, we usually are willing to do so because we get paid more. Great. Owning a job is different. Owning a job is like somebody who works to make a commission, and if they don't work, they're not making any money anymore. I don't know, your classic example might be a real estate agent or somebody who owns a small business by themselves, a solopreneur. If they don't work, they don't get paid. There's an incremental level of complexity to do that compared to the person who simply has a job, who goes to work and is told what to do, right? But when I own a job, I have to go figure out what to do. I have to go make stuff happen in order to get paid. And owning a business is an incremental level of complexity over and above that. Again, in theory, as you work up the complexity scale, you should get rewarded more. And depending on the, let's say, amount of leverage you have, you might be able to start to scale up your income. But at the end of the day, it's only useful if those things are beneficial to you. If you agree that the only things you need in your life are health and relationships. So as you work up the scale of complexity from having a job to owning a business, you should be getting positive feedback from that, right? But then there's all the other things in your life that happen to you or that you choose to take on as a personal responsibility that you really should outsource, but we kind of don't for some reason. So we just take on these levels of responsibility. Like, I guess the classic example would be like cleaning your house. You can outsource that, but I can't tell you how many times like I will wake up on the weekend and be like, oh, my house is a mess. I need to deal with this. When in reality, I could have just paid somebody else to do it. Now, back up a second. I paid somebody, so I spent money, so I have less resources. Have I spent a commensurate amount of money to support my health and relationships first? Different question. If I've done that and I have enough resources left over to be able to outsource my issues, maybe that's a good idea. Then it's one less thing I have to think about. It's less stuff in the way of me being able to make a decision about what I want to do with my time that I have on the weekends to be able to spend my energy on the things that are actually core to my life. So we choose to insource these things, which inherently add complexity to our lives, usually because we haven't been told one way or the other what to do. Like political opinions. Most people like to insource their political opinions, and then they go vote. Most people in this country do vote. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but most people will take their political opinion as if it's their own personal responsibility, which then creates a level of complexity in their life because they have a burden to be an informed voter. And then there's a burden to listen to everybody else's opinion and distill it and make a decision as if that's the most core central thing about their life. I don't know. Or money. I'm making money now. So I had a job. I owned a job. I own a business. Maybe you're going up that scale and you're making more money. All of a sudden, I have excess resources. I've taken care of my staples, my core needs. Let's just call that health and relationships. And I'm moving into the place where I have enough relationships to spend more money on things that are maybe preferences, house cleaning, or even luxuries. You know, let's call it nice vacation. Who knows? But I'm kind of cerebral, so I have all these excess resources. So how do I make sure that, you know, is my IRA fully funded? What do I do with my HSA account? What the heck is a mega backdoor Roth? All of these things. Now all of a sudden there's added complexity in my life, which is taking up brain space. And sometimes it gets in the way of, oh, are my first two things prioritized correctly? There's a bunch of like examples I'm sure that we could pull out of things that technically can be outsourced, that we technically choose to insource. And then it creates these degrees of complexity in our life that may or may not be necessary, right? That's where I started this whole thing, which was like, okay, if somebody's job is to give advice, somebody else is paying them to give advice. It could be a financial advisor. It could be a doctor. It could be a car mechanic. There's a lot of people who you pay to give you advice. And I'm not an expert in that category. What like degree of, let's say, engagement do I need to have in order to be able to tell if the person who's giving me the advice even knows what the heck they're talking about? It's kind of a weird question if you think about it. You have to be like really committed to this. And it is possible. Like I'll use politics as the easiest example. If you are going to choose not to vote, I don't really care if you do or not. I'm not an elected official. But if you choose not to vote, which like 1/3 of people don't vote, basically, plus or minus. So that means some of you are listening to this and didn't vote, whatever. If you choose not to vote, the only way that really works in your life is you have to literally ignore all of the noise. It's true. Like you have to live your life for yourself. I would love to find somebody who has like an Instagram suggested feed that has no political nothing on it. That would be amazing because they've completely like, they don't interact with it. They don't engage with it at all. They just live their life and they ignore all the noise, because if you're not going to vote, why spend any time or energy on the noise? It literally doesn't add anything. The complexity is not beneficial to you. If you are, trying to hire somebody to give you financial advice or give you car advice or medical advice, you name it, the reality is what you need to do is go and find somebody who has an outcome that you like. Go and find a rich person and be like, what did you do? And then here's the deal, guys. Just do whatever they did, okay? We don't have to reinvent everything. Now, you can't take that advice 100%, okay? If somebody's like, well, I started this startup and we had this really complex product and then we took it public for like $1 billion and then I sold it and I left. Like, you're probably not going to do that, okay? But if you go find your average millionaire next door, which by the way, there's a lot of them, and they saved up $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, which is a completely reasonable thing to do in this country, by the way, if you have a baseline level IQ. If you saved up some amount of money and they said, hey, how do I do this? And their answer was, well, I saved a little bit out of every paycheck and I lived within my means and I invested and I lived my life. You can pretty much do that, okay? Yeah, you have no basis to tell whether or not I'm telling you the truth as an expert. I get it. But find somebody who has an outcome that you want, figure out what they did, and then outsource the rest. I think it's actually pretty simple. Unless you want to be one of these people who wants to spend a bunch of time and energy, become an expert level at that thing, at investing. Sure, great, go do it. There's nothing stopping you. You and I both have the internet. I think where it gets all wacky is when people who don't necessarily have the time or energy want to spend the time or energy doing stuff, and then they try to do it themselves. That's where it gets like totally messy. Totally messy. And the reality is, especially with money, most people only have the perspective of what they've done, what they have. They very rarely see the roadmap of every single step that the person who might end up with a 7-figure net worth or 8-figure net worth did. They can only see the end of it. And by the way, by the time you're at the end of it, you kind of forgot all the steps in the middle anyway. But don't make this stuff more complex than it needs to be. That's what I was thinking about today for everybody out there. Is complexity really adding value? Or should I just throw away everything in my house? I'm looking at this room full of trash. It's not trash, but I have a lot of stuff in this room that I haven't touched for a long time. It's a really good proxy for how busy your brain is how many tabs are open on your Safari on your phone. I can't look at it now because now my phone's over there, but I just pulled it up. And I have like 268 tabs open on my phone. And then I was scrolling through it and it was like blind items from 2019 or this random condo in New York that sold in 2021. But at the time I was looking at it, it was an active listing. Or Indiana Hoosiers, football coaches, history. Like none of these things are actually beneficial to my life. I don't care about any of these things. But I have so many freaking tabs open, I can never find what the heck I'm trying to look at. And I think that there's so many people whose brains operate in the exact same way. It's like phenomenal. And then somebody asks you, hey, do you want to go outside and go on a walk? And you can't even think straight or answer the question, which is a really simple question, by the way, and actually is probably good for both your health and your relationships, because there's all these other million things that are floating around in your brain. You can't even make a freaking decision. So I'm going to consciously try to close all my tabs on my phone this week and not spend any time or energy on things that add complexity and make my life marginally better or worse. That's my pledge. So maybe I'll see you next time. Maybe I'll get my life so simple that I actually just quit this. So it could be the end, but for now, we've at least made it this far, and I'll see you next time. Or I won't. Bye-bye.